Welcome to Coffee Theology's Language 101. In this video, we're going to be covering the concept of the stem. As we talked in the last video about words and terms being a way to express an idea, the idea usually finds its home in the stem of a word. And the reason why we call it a stem is that there are different ways that branches can be put on that word, if you want to say it that way, in which that stem can be used differently within a sentence and put into different parts of speech by different endings being placed onto a stem. The stem is often also referred to as the root word, which there's a little bit of difference when you get down to the finer points of language, but for the sake of the level of detail we're going to in this video, I'm going to use the two interchangeably. Now, what is the stem? So, take for instance the word that you see here. Now, it's not spelled correctly in the way that you're looking to have it be spelled, but you are probably able to figure out that that is probably the words like decide. Now notice that I put the E on the end of these 5 letters, and now it is a verb. I have to decide whether I'm going to continue on to the next slide or not, whether I should, go back to where it's, you can be watching me or not, but I have to decide. I have to do an actual action. So that's decide. Now, that being said, I can then take this word and put a different ending and say it's decided. Now, this could be a verb, I decided to go back to full screen. Or it could be an adjective. That choice was already decided. So decided is a way of modifying the word choice and that noun choice. So the ED can put this in a place where the stem can be used as an adjective or as a past tense verb. I could also put EDLY, decidedly. Now, this now makes this an adverb, which is another part of speech. But notice through all of this, the 5 letters DECID haven't really changed. That is why it is the stem. The meaning is found in the stem, and the endings that are put onto the stem are used to indicate what role this word is playing in its sentence and within its context. I could also then put on ing, and again, it's now a verbal form. It is also an adjectival form, and there's different things that we can have by having the ing on the end of DECID, and it's deciding. And then if I want to make this a noun, I can go decision. Now at this point, you'll notice that there is a change to the stem. At the very end, the D became an S. And that is a very common thing that's going to happen, and you'll see that throughout what we learn about the Latin. It's very typical that our lazy mouths get to where we want to say things quicker and we don't want to say certain sounds right next to each other, so we blend them together, and it often becomes just an entirely different letter. So the D here then became an S, and we're going to see later why that D becomes an S and not just any other letter. Now, what this means is that one single stem can perform the role of multiple parts of speech. Oh, hey, there's an interjection. Yeah, anyways, some of you will get that eventually. What this means is that a single stem can take on multiple parts of speech. So there are certain stems where that stem can have an ending that makes it a noun, which is a person, place, or thing, an adjective, which is modifying a noun. It can be a verb, which is an action or state of being. It could be an adverb, which is modifying that, the verb, or the verbals, because you have verbal adjectives in the gerundives and the participle, or you have the verbal nouns in the gerund, infinitive, and then this Latin thing called the supine that we don't come across much in English. So these are all different parts of speech that a single stem can often take depending on what endings are put onto that. Now, what we're going to be looking through then in this series of videos is how does Latin put endings on to convey various meanings. So, for instance, when we look here, you have certissimorum, where the issim is saying that this is the superlative. So the word here, cert, because the stem is similar to a stem in English, we would say, oh, it's certain. We certify something. You get a certificate to make sure that it's made certain. And so cert is certain, and then issim is like most certain. And orum is telling you that this is a genitive of most certain. And so the orum is telling you the role that it's playing in the sentence, which we're going to call case, and we're going to learn about that in a future video. But each part of these endings is telling you something that's added to the concept behind the stem cert. Same thing with the verb. You have the verb laud, which we probably could figure out in English because we say something is laudable. I mean, it's praise, so it's praisable. So the stem holds that meaning of laud. The AV that's in purple is what's called the aspect. And that aspect is this an ongoing action, or is this a completed action? The E and the R and the A the E is what's called a conjugating vowel. It's a vowel that's thrown in between the stem and the ending, and it changes from one group of words to the other, and those groups are going to be called conjugations. But the E and the R and the A help indicate to us what tense or what mood the word is. And then the final letters that are in red, they indicate to us what voice the verb is. Is it active or passive? What person is it? Is it first person, second person, third person? And what number is it? Is it singular or plural? So each of the different parts tell you something. And by learning the patterns and seeing that with the color and grasping that, it's easier to remember all of these various different endings. Now, this is what the chart book that I put together for Latin does. It takes all of the, for instance, with this particular page, it's all of the forms of the verb laudo, showing how it plays out using the color fonts so you can see the consistency of the patterns with the endings. And it helps you recognize those patterns and learn all the different formations much quicker than if you're trying to memorize all these different endings separately. Now, you might say, well, why then does this not become the more common way of going through the Latin? Well, when you're a very strong linguist and you've begun to write a grammar, you've typically studied language a lot. And the real truth is that there's a risk of misconveying how this language came to function this way. And that is, we would think that, oh, at the very beginning, the language, the raw here meant tense, mood, and so on and so forth. But really, it developed in a way that most likely laudav was one word and eramus was another word. And because they were two separate words, a lot of the grammarians don't like to think of dividing up the ending into different parts and saying each part says something. However, that being said, when you recognize the patterns and when you see how regular it is for a great number of the verbs and the nouns and everything, then it gets a lot easier for you to learn the language more quickly and read it quicker. So for me, in a pragmatic sense, it's very helpful to see the patterns and recognize the patterns and learn how the Latin word forms on the stem in this way, and then see how much easier it is to learn all the various endings when you just recognize a few of these patterns. Now, when you are looking at how all these words are formed as individual words, this is what is called semantics. That is why the book that I have is called A Visual Guide to Latin semantics. It's kind of a technical name, I guess, for it, but the semantics is how a single word forms, and what does that word mean based on how it is formed. What does the ending tell you about that word, and how does that give you more understanding of what is being expressed and more precision to what the author intended. The syntax is usually what is referred to when you're talking about phrases and sentences, and how those are all put together. And this is where context comes in, and you start to see the usage of a word within its context being different. So for instance, with syntax, if you take the words in order to, you take them separately, they don't mean what the exact same thing as if we say, I went to the store in order to buy bread. The in order to is a way that those words are grouped together differently to convey even more meaning than just the individual term themselves, where semantics has to do with just the individual term and how it is structured. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Like it below. If you want to get the book, please do. There should be a link below for you to be able to order that. Next, we'll be moving on to Latin pronunciation.